Today on Notsam Wrestling, we come off of both Bash in Berlin and NXT No Mercy. Is Kevin Owens going to turn? Are Drew McIntyre and CM Punk finally done? Who debuted for NXT? And what does Jon Moxley have up his sleeve? Oh, and where were the Bloodline all weekend? This is Notsam Wrestling. Welcome to Notsam Wrestling on this time where we celebrate the summer coming to an end with as much wrestling as we could possibly handle, and we'll talk about all of it. I mean, I was thinking about it over the weekend, about how, we're a week removed from All In, and we get all those matches, the Bryan Danielson and Swerve, the MJF and Ospreay. We turn on 6 days later, right? And we've got Randy Orton and Gunther. We've got Cody and Kevin Owens. The next day, we've got NXT No Mercy. We get that show stealer between Jada Parker and Roxanne Perez. There's so much. But speaking of, before we get into our stories, speaking of NXT No Mercy, I was doing the countdown show, the pre-show, for NXT No Mercy. And I've got to tell you that even in the moment as it was happening, because, ultimately, I'm just a fan and have been a fan for years and years, forever. And so I've seen everything and kind of watched so closely throughout all these different eras. So the significance of certain things is not lost on me. And as I'm sitting there, I'm not kidding. As soon as Zach Wentz won the X Division Championship on Friday at TNA, Emergence, I go, oh my God. Am I going to get to talk about him being the TNA X Division champion on the NXT countdown show on WWE TV? And as I'm doing it, as I'm sitting there, first of all, already just saying wrestler still tickles me. The fact that I can get away with doing, honestly, talking about CM Punk on WWE television tickles me. The fact that we're at a point where not only is that okay, it'd be crazy not to. The fact that I can talk about the Wesley Zachary Wentz match and go WWE superstar versus TNA wrestler. Zachary Wentz became the TNA X Division champion 48 hours ago. And I'm talking about all this stuff on WWE television. It is so fun as somebody who's seen all of it and honestly thought that none of this would be possible, right? You never thought that this would happen. Just looking at the main event of NXT No Mercy, the fact that we haven't even really recovered from the shock that Ethan Page is in NXT, let alone is now the NXT champion. And before we can even recover from that shock, he's main eventing the show against Joe Hendry, who's a TNA contracted wrestler. It's crazy. Well, we'll talk about No Mercy in a couple of minutes. But before we do, coming off of Bash in Berlin now, all my thoughts and feelings on Bash in Berlin were a part of the Emergency Instant Reaction podcast that I dropped. I did it with Megan Morant here on the Not Sam Wrestling feed, whether it's the YouTube channel or the audio feed. All of our immediate feelings coming off of that show were there for everybody to digest them. But as I've let it sit for a few days, the Kevin Owens Cody story coming out of that show is probably the number one story that I've got, because the more analysis that I listen to about it, because I serve around, listen to the YouTubers, listen to the podcasters. What did they think? Did I miss anything? Did they see something that I didn't see? Maybe they have a perspective that I didn't quite think of. I love finding stuff like that. But it was interesting that such an emphasis was made on the fact that Kevin Owens and Cody Rhodes went in as friends. And that's not by accident that people are noticing that, Cody has been mentioning it, not just in promos, but he talked about it at the press conference. He's talked about it in interviews. And Cody is so brilliant because he's doing it in a way where it doesn't feel like it's WWE wrestling. It doesn't feel like it's a storyline. Cody is doing it in a way where he's referencing Kevin Owens as a talent before he got to the WWE. Without saying it, he's talking about the career of Kevin Steen. And he's talking about the fact that Kevin Owens did things his way and the business changed because of it before he even got to the WWE. And when he got to the WWE, it was a complete 180, turn the business on its head moment. Because not only was this guy who by design was not quote unquote a WWE guy in the WWE, but he was doing it on his own terms. He still had his shorts and his t-shirt on. He still looked exactly how he had looked when he was in Ring of Honor. And he wrestled how he wrestled when he was in Ring of Honor. And he told stories the way he told stories when he was in Ring of Honor and when he was in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla and when he was, making the biggest name for himself that one could across the independents. And Cody referencing that and making it go like, yeah, that is part of our relationship, is that I fully acknowledge that everything I get credited for was something Kevin Owens already did. It's the reverse of what Cody talked about with CM Punk in Cody's last AEW promo, where he said that everything that CM Punk talked about in the pipe bomb, Cody actually did. What Cody is now saying is everything he's done since then, meaning coming back to the WWE and changing things that way, is, for lack of a better term, following in the footsteps of Kevin Owens. And it makes you feel like this is a real friendship. It adds layers and depth to this friendship. So now you're watching, and it's not just two baby faces that are telling you that they're friends, which I think is brilliant because now you're invested. It's given you something as a fan to be fully invested in. The whole friendship, though, we're seeing, right? Like in the match, we saw Cody's knee play a part, which Cody had referenced in the promos, or Kevin had referenced in the promo on SmackDown before Bash in Berlin. And the old Kevin Owens would have taken advantage of it. This Kevin Owens did not. He had the opportunity to powerbomb Cody Rhodes on that ring apron. The old Cody Rhodes would have done it. The new Kevin Owens did not. And that's not because Kevin Owens is above powerbombing people on ring aprons. It's because of the specific relationship that he has with Cody Rhodes. That what is different about Kevin Owens is in previous iterations, he was so focused on himself and feeding his family that there was no friendship that he wouldn't destroy to get ahead. Now we've found a friendship that he's not willing to destroy to get ahead. And those friendships keep building. He built his relationship, his partnership with Randy Orton, that even ended up with the RKO tag team name that they both still represent. So, but I think it's important to make that distinction, that Kevin Owens is not saying, well, I'm a good guy now, so I don't do that stuff to people anymore. He's saying, I won't do it to Cody because it wouldn't be right. And Cody's almost asking for it. Cody's almost saying, I'm breathing off the challenge. I need it. I need to know that I'm the best. Cody, and this is, again, drifting from storyline into real life. Cody wants to be the top guy, but he doesn't want to be given the position of top guy. He wants it to be undeniable. He wants to be the top guy because he is the top guy. He wants to main event with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania instead of The Rock main eventing with Roman Reigns at WrestleMania, because it is what is truly the best thing for business and what the audience wants to see, not just a little bit more, but a lot more. And that's what he got at WrestleMania. I'm sure there was a point of pride for Cody Rhodes to be the person to take on the Triple H role at the press conference after Bash in Berlin. They made the announcement. Cody Rhodes is the one that made the announcement. The Triple H, his daughter, was leaving for college. So Triple H had left Bash in Berlin a little bit early to make sure he could get home to bring his daughter to college, which right there tells you everything you want to know about Triple H. The fact that, that there is a human being running things is a beautiful thing, and that real life and family count, and it comes from the top. The old, I wouldn't ask you to do anything I wouldn't do myself. And guess what? I'm going to bring my daughter to college because it's the right thing to do for a father. And, it makes it, it's a beautiful thing. However, Cody ended up being the one to read some of the stats about how well they were doing, and kind of be that point person and even have to field some of the more difficult questions from some of the journalists in the audience. And I'm sure that was a huge point of pride for Cody Rhodes. Keep in mind, Cody Rhodes wrestled in the opening match. So that means he waited through the whole show, after the show, for the post-show to already start, and then still, this is now 3+ hours after his match is over, and he's there to represent the company in that role, which hasn't really been done since the post-pay-per-view press conferences have been a thing. And I'm sure that meant a lot to Cody Rhodes. So we're seeing this sort of reality and storyline blend together, right? But on SmackDown, we had, and we'll talk about the Bloodline in a moment, we had a pre-tape promo where Solo Sikoa said he was coming for the WWE champion, whether it be Cody Rhodes or Kevin Owens, after Bash in Berlin. And when Cody won the match, one of the first things Michael Cole said is that Solo Sikoa is next. So there almost is this understanding that Solo Sikoa is next. Now, in all the time that Kevin wouldn't do certain things in the match because he was Cody's friend, he didn't look happy about it. And when he lost, he didn't look like the better man won. He looked like the right thing to do here is to raise Cody's hand. But I'm not happy about what happened. He wouldn't let Cody raise his hand. As they walk back down the aisle, Cody had to, and he does it so well. Cody gets this like great sort of, I have no idea what's going on around me smile on his face. Everything is great. While Kevin Owens doesn't have even a hint of a smile. I think that not only is that Kevin Owens story not done, but if Cody does show up on SmackDown and go, all right, Solo Sikoa, you asked for it, you're next. That's twofold for Kevin. Number one, whoa, you won that match that night, but there were things that I didn't do. Like I'm just out of the picture just like that. And number two, and if I am out of the picture, you're going back to the Bloodline? What has Solo done to earn a title shot? Are you kidding me? The only person who deserves a WWE Championship match less than me would be Solo Sikoa. All these things are things where Kevin Owens is doing the right thing. And what is he getting for it? Because what did he get for it in Berlin? He lost the match, and maybe more importantly, he got booed for it. He got booed for not doing the bad things. And then coming off of all that, his friend who he protected and did the right thing for is now going to the person or the people that he hates the most and going, you get the next opportunity? I can't imagine that would sit well with Kevin Owens. Now, of course, Randy Orton will be back. And you wonder where he'll fit in. But honestly, I think for the time being, I personally feel like right now, the Cody Kevin Owens story and Kevin Owens turning is easier to swallow than Randy Orton turning. Meaning, I don't think people want Randy Orton to turn right now. Berlin wouldn't even boo him. They cheered for Gunther, but everybody loves Randy Orton. Randy Orton's gotten to that point in his career where everybody's either grown up on him, everybody's watched his entire journey, and he's gotten to this place where he's at the peak. And everybody loves enjoying that moment. Everybody loves reaching that destination together. I don't think anybody wants to see Randy turn, at least not right now. It's inevitable that he will, because that's who Randy Orton is as a character, but at least not right now. Aside from that, I feel like if Randy Orton were to turn, it would almost just be like, well, because it was inevitable, we're just choosing now to do it. And you could have said the same thing about Kevin Owens. Had Kevin Owens turned, at the pay-per-view or when I wanted him to, even before the pay-per-view, I think it would have felt like Kevin Owens is turning because that's what Kevin Owens does. He turns. I think the idea of giving it some time and waiting for it, you're not losing any of the logic. But now you're getting to this place where it's like, oh, Kevin Owens, it's not just one of those, yep, Kevin Owens is turning because that's what Kevin Owens does. He turns on people. It hurts now. I've invested in this. Say it ain't so. No, no, no. There's a real opportunity to go from something that would have just been a simple on-off switch heel turn to something that like tears at your soul. I loved this friendship. You set this friendship up for me and I believed in it. And so now Kevin Owens is destroying this friendship that not only means something to Cody and to him, but that means something to us. And it makes Kevin Owens that much more of a villain. And let's be honest, Kevin Owens just tearing stuff up as a villain again and just destroying people would be really entertaining to see. I think we'll get to Randy Orton, but I almost feel like, dude, bring Randy Orton back to SmackDown and like, I don't know if there's something to do with him and A-Town Down Under. I don't know if there's, maybe you even do a babyface Randy Orton LA Knight thing for a little bit. I don't know, but I would try to find a story. Maybe you have Kevin Owens and Cody shift over here, and then Randy Orton has something going on with the Bloodline before Roman Reigns comes back. Whatever it is, I would kind of separate Randy Orton from the whole thing for the time being and just do KO and Cody Rhodes and make KO terrorize Cody Rhodes for a while before you eventually get to Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton, which leads us to Cody Rhodes and The Rock. It's the same thing that I've been saying since the beginning. Now we say Randy Orton back on SmackDown because obviously at the Bash, which we covered on the emergency podcast that came out right after Bash in Berlin, Gunther beat Randy Orton. So I would imagine that Randy Orton goes back to SmackDown. And CM Punk beat Drew McIntyre. So on the post show, they aired a pre-recorded interview with CM Punk. And this interview was done right after the Drew McIntyre CM Punk match where CM Punk challenged the winner. He said, I've done it now. I've beaten Drew McIntyre. I'm done with him. I'm here for the gold. I'm here for the world title. And I want to have a shot at the championship. And so we are left going like, okay, we talked about it on the Feeling Show, on the emergency podcast, and said, I don't exactly know who Gunther's next opponent would be. But CM Punk versus Gunther is a huge match. CM Punk did beat Drew McIntyre as definitively as someone can beat anyone in a strap match. It's still a strap match, so I kind of stand by this idea that it wasn't definitive because he didn't pin him or submit him. And you might say, well, he did submit him. Remember the sharpshooter? Remember like Drew McIntyre tapped out in that match. But anytime, if somebody taps out while the referee is knocked out, if somebody taps out during a strap match, if somebody taps out during a cage match that's escape only, whatever, I never think, okay, well, then you could say, well, he tapped out. CM Punk would have won right there. Because tapping out in a match where tap out doesn't count as a finish is not saying uncle. Tapping out, you could just have any villain say, yeah, that was a strategy. I mean, because if I'm in a match and somebody puts a sharpshooter on me and I know tap out isn't going to stop the match, I'm just going to tap out immediately and hope that the guy who's got the sharpshooter on me forgets that that's not the finish and just drops the thing off me. I mean, why not tap? Why wouldn't you just start tapping immediately? You know you're not going to lose the match. So why would you not? Why would you just deal with it? Just start tapping. Who cares? It's not going to change anything. So because he didn't get a legit tap out submission victory or a legit pinfall victory and you go, wow, he put him in like 4 or 5 go to sleeps, knocked him out cold. Yes. However, he basically had to drop him with a go to sleep every corner post that he hit. And one could argue that if he had to hit another go-to-sleep to hit each corner post, then maybe the go-to-sleep wouldn't have been enough to put out Drew McIntyre. So, I'm going, okay, there's enough there by a mile to say Drew still has an argument that he wants one more shot because Drew did pin CM Punk. Special referee, sure, but Drew pinned CM Punk. CM Punk got the bracelet back, but while the bracelet was a big part, it was never what the whole story was about. The bracelet didn't come into play until after Clash at the Castle. It was like June when the bracelet came into play. This story has been going since well before WrestleMania. So there's no reason to think that this story could not continue on after the bracelet. The bracelet was just a cherry on the top of this rivalry. That said, because the finish was so definitive, I wouldn't mind CM Punk going, I'm moving on to something else. And I feel like ever since WrestleMania 38 and that series of matches between Cody and Seth, where you basically got 3 pay-per-views and it meant 3 matches with Cody and Seth, and the last one is Hell in a Cell. It's almost like we feel like that's the only way to do it, and that's not the only way to do it. There's plenty of time to do a third CM Punk Drew McIntyre match. It doesn't have to be the next CM Punk or Drew McIntyre match. CM Punk doesn't have to only face Drew McIntyre. I mean, as a matter of fact, technically, part of this story, as much a part of the story as the bracelet, has been the fact that both have said this is never going to end, and both have said they'll never allow the other to win WWE Gold. They both just want to ruin each other's lives. So if you have CM Punk in a position where he could win WWE Gold, to me, all it does is add to the story of Punk and Drew McIntyre. I also think that Punk and Gunther is a massive main event for a show like Bad Blood. Insane. And it really does also let you know, okay, we're back. CM Punk is back. He's not just here to tell one story. It's like, no. He's going to be wrestling, and he's going to be having legit matches. The question is, so Punk and McIntyre is not done by a long shot, in my opinion. The question is, what part does Drew McIntyre play if they're going to do a CM Punk Gunther match at Bad Blood? And that's a big if. But logic would tell you that if we've already introduced this premise that neither one of them want the other to have what they want, which is a world championship, then you'd go, oh, easy, CM Punk versus Gunther, Drew McIntyre interferes and screws CM Punk, and it leads to another CM Punk Drew McIntyre match. Sure, it could happen, and there are ways you can do it that it'd be great. On paper, to me, a little bit, it feels like we've kind of seen that a lot. That was how we were getting through Punk being injured. When Punk was injured and couldn't compete, the interference finishes did a lot because it made it so we could continue this rivalry without having to worry about CM Punk getting into a ring. He'd just come and interfere in all the matches. So, like, I almost feel like since you did it so much, it's like it would start to fatigue it could potentially start to fatigue the audience, which you don't want. I almost feel like there's at least a consideration to maybe taking Drew off TV for a month. In the month of September, Drew is just gone. Because what can Drew say? Drew is either gone or starts a rivalry with somebody else completely different. But I kind of lean towards gone. And then maybe Punk goes through the month building to this match with Gunther. Maybe Gunther is able to beat Punk clean. And then maybe the next night on Raw or the next Monday on Raw is when Punk comes out to talk about how much he respects Gunther. And that's when Drew McIntyre comes out and beats the you-know-what out of him. Unless there's some way to... I just feel like if you're going to do Punk and Gunther, people want to see Punk and Gunther. And they'll want to see that match happen. And you could be saying, too, well, we can't have Gunther just beat Punk. And it's like, you kind of have to have Gunther just beat Punk. Punk's already been beaten once. He's not going to be undefeated. I don't think it would destroy CM Punk at all to have Gunther beat him, especially if it leads to more with Drew McIntyre. Maybe Drew beats him up on the Raw before Bad Blood. And Gunther beats him, and CM Punk says, make no excuses, but I wasn't 100% going into that match, and it still leads to another. I'm just trying to figure out a way to do it without interference from McIntyre, without losing the idea that they did promise that they wouldn't allow the other to win championship gold. But I'm really, and I also feel like if you have CM Punk lose to Gunther, and then at the next show, CM Punk beats Drew a second time, I think Drew would be able to recover, and I think CM Punk would be fully recovered from his loss to Gunther, and it's not like people aren't going to want to see that get run back. It really complicates things, because I think another Drew McIntyre versus Gunther match, this time for the World Heavyweight title, is easy pickings, is right there for you. But are we going to get to a point where we can have these matches without the two of them interfering? Or do we need to figure out a way to put them on different shows? And that way their rivalry only heats up again when they encounter each other. I almost feel like that's what you have to do. Like, as long as they're on the same show, they're going to have to be somewhat linked. Maybe not to the point where it's like this is what both of their main story is, but it's on some level linked. Maybe Pierce and Nick Aldis figure out a trade, get Drew McIntyre over to SmackDown. Then you could do a Drew McIntyre versus Cody match. That wouldn't be bad. If you figured out a way, you could even do that like now. Like, you could have Drew attack CM Punk right away and figure out a way that, like, Adam Pearce is ready to move on completely. And in order to get Punk and Gunther in the ring, he's got to get Drew off his show, and he figures out some kind of trade. And maybe you do. Maybe that's how you also get Randy Orton out of the Cody-Kevin Owens situation, is you just trade Randy Orton for Drew McIntyre. Randy goes to Raw, Drew McIntyre goes to SmackDown, and now you've got something brewing, right? Maybe you can do Drew versus whoever, LA Knight, whoever you want. But something is brewing after KO. You can do Cody and Drew. And you can also maybe eventually get back to Randy and Gunther. But in the meantime, you can do KO and Cody without Randy, and you can do Punk and Gunther without Drew. Wouldn't be the worst trade in the world. And I can't imagine I'd be mad at it. But speaking of SmackDown, where was the Bloodline, huh? All we saw of the Bloodline in Germany was a pre-taped promo from Solo Sikoa. Three things of significance. Of course, Jacob Fatu placing the Ulafala around the neck of Solo Sikoa, although Solo told him to stop for a second and then had him do it. And of course, it is the chewed up Ulafala. It's the Ulafala that's been through it, not the shiny new sparkly Ulafala that Roman Reigns always wore, which makes me feel like maybe the elders. I don't think it means that Solo's losing it. I think it means that the elders are not necessarily on board with this Solo Sikoa thing. So while for Roman, it was easy to trade in and get a new Ulafala, because anytime he wanted, he'd just go to the elders and he'd go, "Hey, elders, I need a new Ula." And they go, "All right, no problem. Here's a brand new one, sparkly and shiny." Solo Sikoa goes, "Elders, I need a new Ulafala." They'll go, "Well, you can't have one. We don't consider you the tribal chief." Maybe. So, but the two things of significance were, three things, I guess. Solo challenging the winner of the championship match, hyping up the tag match. I get it sounded like he said on SmackDown they're going to do the Tongans versus DIY versus Street Profits on SmackDown, which I would imagine the Bloodline shouldn't lose the tag title. But what I took the most from was Solo Sikoa taking full singular credit for everything the Bloodline has done since WrestleMania. When the Bloodline took out the wise man Paul Heyman, Solo Sikoa didn't say we. Solo Sikoa didn't say the Bloodline. Solo Sikoa said, "I took out the wise man." Solo Sikoa talked about Roman Reigns. He didn't say we. He didn't say the Bloodline. He didn't say the team. He said, I took out Roman Reigns. And it was just this weird way of specifically saying I on all that stuff. It just leads you more to the realization of what a glory hound Solo Sikoa is. That Roman Reigns, even as the Roman Reigns character, the tribal chief that was Roman Reigns, even the character took pride in the idea that everyone that touches Roman Reigns is better for it. That everybody eats when Roman eats. That when Roman accomplishes something, we all accomplish something. This is not the language that Solo Sikoa is using. He also said the tribal chief is coming, which he did establish himself as the tribal chief. So I'm not going to look too far into that, but it's almost like, oh, when's the OTC coming back? When's the OTC coming back? I think that it's not a bad thing that the Bloodline wasn't on this show. I think that that's part of having 5-match shows, is that even key stories are not going to be on every single premium live event. And so it does give you the opportunity to let certain things breathe. We can have a huge incident like the Bloodline taking out Roman Reigns, and then we can let it breathe and let some of these other stories be told before we get back to the Bloodline and to Roman Reigns and everything going on within there. But yeah, I think that to me was the most telling thing. The first person pronouns of I was like, yeah, that's it. That's the Solo character. That's who he is. And, I think people are waiting for Jacob Fatu to turn on Solo, and it might happen eventually. I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I don't think that that's the role of Jacob Fatu. Like, there has to be somebody in this Bloodline that the rest of the roster and that we as fans can look at and go, that's what makes the Bloodline unbeatable. Because otherwise, it's just a faction, right? And I think that Jacob needs to be there to lend that credibility to the new Bloodline. By design, by the way. Completely by design. It's yeah. I think it's totally by design. Please forgive the interruption, but if you're going to be throwing down some bets this football season, you need MyBookie. Their sportsbook and casino platform lets you bet from anywhere, anytime. MyBookie, they make it so easy that you don't even need to download an app. It's so simple to get started and so much fun. They even run a contest where you can enter for as little as $1.25 and win up to 10 grand. Look, I'm going to be 100% honest with you. I started paying attention to sports maybe like a year ago, and I can already tell you how much more fun all of this makes watching every single game. When you're done placing bets on all your favorite sports teams, try out their casino with blackjack, video poker, even a live lotto. There's no need to download an app. Just click the link in the show notes, sign up, and you're ready to bet. Lock your futures in now while you're waiting for the season to begin, and use promo code NOTSAM to claim a bonus up to $1,000 on that first deposit. That's NOTSAM to start the college football season off with house money. Don't ever miss out on the action. Bet anything, anywhere, anytime, only with MyBookie. Speaking of by design, NXT No Mercy, by design, was, out of the cannon this show. I got to host the countdown show for it, but it was really like just thinking about it and looking over this card and realizing that NXT has just gotten really good at taking advantage of everything that they have access to. And it's impossible to say that TNA hasn't benefited incredibly from the partnership that it has with NXT. It goes back to the clip from the interview that I did with Bully Ray, where he talked about what a different scenario this partnership is with TNA. And I would agree with them that I don't want WWE to buy up TNA. I don't think that that's what it should be about. I think it should be about helping this other promotion while the promotion helps you, because it has helped NXT as well. People have found this new interest in NXT because anything can happen. And, there are a lot of stars that NXT fans may not even know, but the significance of them coming from TNA is not lost on anybody. And it's turned them into fans of those TNA stars to the point that TNA is selling out more shows now. I would imagine TNA's pay-per-views have gone up. And if anybody could find what station they were on, I would bet there'd be more eyeballs on those stations. So just going over some of the things that happened at No Mercy. You had a big angle with Ridge Holland after Chase U lost the NXT Tag Team Championship to Axiom and Nathan Frazier. Ridge Holland turned on all of Chase U and put Andre Chase through a table. They had to wheel him out on a stretcher. It was a scene of all scenes, and it was they really put the work into this one. I felt like they worked hard to make you believe that while yes, it may be obvious that Ridge Holland is going to turn on Chase U, he's not. And they took their time. And they went, do you believe? No, I don't believe it. Okay, we'll keep going. Do you believe it? I don't think so. Okay, we'll keep going. Do you believe it? Yeah, okay, I believe it. He's in Chase U. No, he's not. You were right from the beginning. You got me. I love that stuff. I thought it was well executed and adds a lot of interest to Chase U. I think that adding dimensions to Chase U is crucial because people love Chase U. They love cheering for Chase U. They love what the act is. But in order to reach that next level, every act needs to have these dimensions to it. And I think that this adds a wrinkle for sure. You had Zach Wentz not only winning, which this is the difference, right? That even if you had cooperation in the old days with other promotions, there's no way a TNA guy, no matter how big they were, would ever beat an NXT guy, no matter how small they were, on any show. Now, in this scenario, you had Zachary Wentz and Wes Lee, who are obviously fairly well equaled up in the sense that they used to be the NXT Tag Team Champions. But TNA did a smart thing, which I still have no idea why they never put the world title on Joe Hendry. But they put the X Division Championship on Zachary Wentz on Friday. And it led to Zachary Wentz being able to walk in to Denver, to No Mercy, with the TNA X Division Championship. And Zachary Wentz actually not only got the win, but then Zachary Wentz and Trey Miguel of the Rascals in TNA called out the NXT Tag Team Champions, and we're getting a triple threat on TV to determine the next number one contender for the NXT Tag Team Championship, and those two are in it. Nuts. You had Kaylani Jordan beating Wendy Chu. You had the Women's Championship match, which we should talk about, because not only to me did this match steal the show, I thought Jada Parker is just another one of these examples why we see where, like, in one of the breaks, it was like one of the Peacock breaks or whatever, they aired back-to-back promo packages. And one was for the young OG, and the other was for Izzy Dane. And the young OG was sitting there telling this story of growing up a wrestling fan and always loving wrestling and his parents loving wrestling and having a backyard wrestling fed and then going and learning how to wrestle professionally and doing all this stuff. And then right after that, the Izzy Dane package came on, and it was her talking about what a great volleyball player she was and what a great athlete she is and how important that all is. And that really summed it up, right? I think when people read these internet reports about they're looking for athletes now. They don't want indie talent anymore. They want this, they want that. It's like maybe they don't only want athletes. Maybe there's always going to be a place for indie talent, but at the same time, they're looking at investing in athletes. And I would say that it's pretty well paid off so far, this investment in really looking at athletes. You look at a Braun Breaker, who, yes, has a pro wrestling family, but ultimately did not have any pro wrestling experience before he got to NXT. You look at this whole generation of men and women coming in from D1 athletic backgrounds. And I mean, look at Tiffany Stratton. She's 3 years in the business total. And whatever they're doing at that performance center, whatever they're doing to motivate those kids and get them excited about what's happening. Thea Hale is like 20 years old or something like that. And she's awesome. Whatever the lessons that they're teaching at this performance center are, they're real good at it. Because clearly they're onto something. And I felt strongly about that when I was looking at Jada Parker. Now, again, you look at Jada Parker versus Roxanne Perez. Roxanne Perez is a similar story to the story of the professional wrestler who grew up as a kid wanting to be a wrestler, grew up obsessed with wrestling, didn't do any other sports because they just cared about wrestling. They didn't care about sports. Roxanne Perez went through Booker T's school at Reality of Wrestling. Roxanne Perez went through Ring of Honor. And she gets to NXT and she wins the NXT championship. And now she's having this match, this women's championship match with Jada Parker, who comes from the other world of athletics, who wasn't sitting there necessarily pursuing a professional wrestling career until it was presented to her as an option. But because she's a D1 athlete and because this thing does appeal to her, she puts the work in. A lot of us forget the work ethic that it takes to become an athlete at the level of what we're talking about. And if you apply that work ethic in truth to becoming a professional wrestler, a lot of times you can get pretty phenomenal results. And I think that Jada Parker proved it. I just think that, for somebody who has very little pro wrestling experience, she had a match with, This Is Awesome chants going, and they were well deserved. It was really, really cool to see. And it was really cool to see somebody like Roxanne Perez, who has fully come into her own in NXT, who has found this character and who has embraced truly being the dominant women's champion, who came from the world of pro wrestling and independent wrestling and all this stuff. I mean, it's all there. And then at the end, after Roxanne Perez beats Jada Parker, and it's like, okay, Roxanne Perez has now beaten talent that's on the main roster. She's beaten the top female talent that's been in NXT for a while. She's now beaten some of the top female talent that's new to NXT. Who is there left for Roxanne Perez to take on? And we had gotten hints at this the week before on NXT television, where there was somebody else in the room with Jada Parker and Roxanne Perez. And who is it? Finally, after all the rumors, after seeing her in the audience of NXT months and months and months ago, we finally see Giulia emerges through the smoke at NXT No Mercy. It says Giulia on the screen behind her. People lose their minds. A lot of them have seen Giulia wrestle. A lot of them have not. But everybody's heard this buzz over the last several months that this was the free agent when it comes to global female professional wrestlers. And NXT got her. Now you can go back online if you haven't seen her perform. Huge star in Stardom and technically New Japan, but really like Stardom. I think the person who ran Stardom, I believe, forgive me if I'm wrong, but ended up out of Stardom, started up this new promotion called Marigold. That's where Giulia has been in the meantime. But she is here now. She is in the States. She is in NXT, and she squared off against Roxanne Perez. I would imagine that this is going to be your Halloween Havoc match. They announced, I believe, last night that Halloween Havoc was going to be a premium live event, unless I'm wrong. If it is a premium live event, then I feel like Giulia versus Roxanne Perez is the match to have. I mean, you almost feel like Giulia's crowning moment should be at the WrestleMania show at Stand and Deliver, but I've got to imagine that the build-up to Halloween Havoc being on the CW, and the champions that get crowned on that premium live event being the first champions of that CW NXT era, so that's going to be huge for NXT, are going to be important. And I kind of feel like that's what we're going to get with Giulia. And then, of course, you had your main event, which is Joe Hendry, who, again, this goes back to let him cook. With Joe Hendry, if there was ever proof to let him cook, Joe Hendry is the proof. Because when Joe Hendry showed up to NXT for the first time, he went into a battle royal and he got eliminated immediately. And I heard the most expert of experts in the world of internet professional wrestling talking about how dumb it was, how it didn't make any sense. Joe Hendry is so over. Why would you do this to Joe Hendry? It's like, relax. Let him cook. Because here we are, only a couple months later, and Joe Hendry is in the main event NXT World Title match against Ethan Page, who I think people are still shocked is in NXT. You had Trick Williams as the referee in that match. That referee finish, interesting that it kept coming up at SummerSlam with Drew McIntyre, CM Punk, and Seth Rollins. But I don't want to count this fall, but I will vibe that Trick Williams was giving Ethan Page was far more similar to Shawn, Brett, and Undertaker than Seth, Drew McIntyre, and CM Punk ended up being, which was interesting to me. But then you had the attack at the end of the show of Pete Dunne coming out and attacking Trick Williams, which I thought was, a little weird because it's almost like that's the final moment of the show. Obviously, it's going to end up being a scenario where Pete Dunne is, I would imagine, going to play a far more significant role in NXT than just having a match with Trick Williams on Tuesday. If it really is just that they're having a match with Trick Williams on Tuesday, then, I guess you got a good opportunity to tell people to tune into the show on Tuesday. But it's an interesting placement, to say the least. But either way, it was a great premium live event. And I had so much fun watching it. NXT is nailing it right now. They're really nailing it. They're doing so much stuff and operating at such a pace that we're only a month out of NXT debuting on the CW, and I really can't wait to see what that looks like. And I couldn't wait. I know a lot of people couldn't wait to see what the Uncle Howdy debut match was going to look like on Monday Night Raw. We had Uncle Howdy in a match with Chad Gable, and it kind of goes back to everything we've been saying about Uncle Howdy. Now, so there's this comparison, I guess, that I keep seeing people make. And they do it for the Bloodline, and they do it for the Uncle Howdy stuff. And they go, well, I don't know. The thing about the Solo Sikoa stuff is he's not as good as Roman Reigns. The new Bloodline, it's just not the same as the old Bloodline. Yeah, I know. That's the whole point. As a matter of fact, that's the story that's being told. And then they go, look, I know this Uncle Howdy stuff is working and people like it, and it's good. All the segments have been good, but they're never going to be Bray. I know. That's the story to it. They're branched off of Bray. They're not trying to redo anything. The new Bloodline is not trying to redo the old Bloodline. Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Six are not trying to redo Bray Wyatt. They're trying to tell a continuation of the story. And I think they're doing a pretty great job, because you end up with this group that is still that sort of supernatural horror movie aesthetic and feel, but is based in real life. And we got that confirmed when we saw Chad Gable and Uncle Howdy wrestling, because Uncle Howdy was selling for Chad Gable. It was a wrestling match. And so when you can have all this other stuff going on and you realize that this is Bo Dallas, and they've said it, That's Bo Dallas, and he's wearing a mask with fake hair on it. But he calls himself Uncle Howdy. But it is Bo Dallas. You're not stupid. You're not crazy. It's Bo Dallas. But he's wrestling as Uncle Howdy. He's playing mind games. And in the style of wrestling and the whole thing, that's what it is. It's mind games. It's this psychological thing that's happening. It's this choice that everybody in the Wyatt Six are making. They're calling Nikki Cross now. She's playing the character based on Abigail, but that's Nikki Cross under the mask. You know, when Gacy and Rowan and Dexter Lumis wrestled, they take their masks off, they use their real names, their real wrestling names anyway. And so what you've got is a group that you can cheer, you can boo, they can win, they can lose, stories can be told, and you're not limited to those characters living in this world that the other characters on your show don't live in. I thought it was real cool that Uncle Howdy leaves the mask on. The wristband that he had was not only a tribute to his brother Bray Wyatt, but it was actually made, and Jason Baker, who makes all the masks and a lot of the costuming for Bray and for the Wyatt Six and for many other superstars, made that wrist protector, that forearm cover for Uncle Howdy using pieces of Bray's old gear. One of it was like the gear that he wore when they lit him on fire. It was gear that he wore in his last run. It was really, and he put up an Instagram slideshow of where the gear was from. But it was really, really cool. I even think that like Chad Gable wasn't killed for losing to Uncle Howdy, right? There was interference in the match. There's all this stuff going on. But Chad Gable got a lot of good shots in. He'll be all right. Now that, to me, I feel like KO and Cody, clearly not done. CM Punk and Drew, clearly not done. If you told me the Wyatt Six were done with American Made, I'd go, yeah, maybe I could buy that. I'm not sure. I wouldn't be surprised if they're not. But if that's the end of that story, I could see it being the end of that story. And now Chad Gable comes off of that story, and maybe we go back to, Otis and American Alpha laughing at them. And who knows? Maybe at first Chad Gable doesn't want anything to do with them. And maybe it takes, Otis saying, Chad, we were friends, but we were never family. And once he says that, then maybe Chad Gable and Otis can continue on with the rivalry that they had before. I don't know. But it'll be interesting to find out what happens next. I do want to send condolences to the family of the great Sid Vicious. We lost Sid Vicious, Psycho Sid, Sid Justice over the week. And I just want to talk about Sid a little bit. Sid, in a world where aura is a word that is now talked about and is very in vogue, Sid was one of the OGs of aura. Sid was one of those, even at a time in wrestling where everybody was huge, Sid made you stop and stare and go, who is that? And who is he going to destroy today? It's really interesting with Sid because everybody has, stories of Sid doing weird stuff or times where they're critical of Sid or Sid not showing up to this or not showing up to that. But I feel like ultimately when we lose somebody like Sid, all that sort of peripheral stuff goes away. And what becomes really important are the moments that were made that affected us. And any of us that grew up as wrestling fans remember those moments that were created by Sid. And it hit in multiple different eras. Sid really started to gain attention in the late 80s and very early 90s in WCW. And WCW began pushing him as like a top guy, and he ended up leaving. In 1991, he goes over to WWE. And in WWE, they're ready to push him as a top guy as well. That's the thing about Sid. He was always a top guy. No matter where he went, top guy, starting in late 80s, early 90s, and throughout his career. He kind of only existed as a top guy. So he goes to WWE in 1991, and he makes his debut, I believe it was his debut, as the special guest referee in the match made in hell at SummerSlam 91, which was General Adnan, Colonel Mustafa, and Sergeant Slaughter versus Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Now, that's the same night that the Ultimate Warrior was fired, right after that match. But pretty quickly after that, Sid Justice is who he became, ends up becoming a villain. He started doing this gimmick where he would wrestle enhancement talent every week, which was what everybody was doing every week. But he would, every single time, powerbomb them and continue to powerbomb them and make them every time get taken out on a stretcher with a little placard that said call 911. He would go to the 1992 Royal Rumble. He almost won the thing. Hulk Hogan Sid eliminated Hulk Hogan, which was fair. Totally fair. It was down to Ric Flair and Sid Justice. Hulk Hogan goes to shake Sid's hand, tries to pull him over the top rope. For some reason, Hulk Hogan just did the most awful heel moves ever. And people still went, oh yeah, he's a babyface. It was the least babyface thing he could ever do. Started pulling Sid over the top. Ric Flair eliminates him. Ric Flair ends up winning the 1992 Royal Rumble. But there were a lot of people that wanted Sid to win that Royal Rumble. Sid still ends up going to WrestleMania to headline against Hulk Hogan. The world title match is Ric Flair versus the Macho Man Randy Savage. But the main event is Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice in a match that was advertised as potentially Hulk Hogan's last match. On the way to WrestleMania, Hulk Hogan destroys the barbershop, Brutus Beefcake's barbershop. Of course, Brutus Beefcake, the real-life and storyline best friend of Hulk Hogan. He ends up with this barbershop. It's the same barbershop where Shawn Michaels turned on Marty Jannetty. Sid destroys the barbershop, ends up blasting a can of shaving cream that gets all over his face, but he doesn't even wipe off his face. He just keeps destroying this barbershop. Brutus the Barber Beefcake walks away. Runs away, I should say. And Sid ends up headlining WrestleMania against Hulk Hogan. Sid is gone from the WWE not too long after WrestleMania 8, ends up going back to WCW, where he's a headliner again. It's Sid and Vader now as a team, and their rivals are Sting and the British Bulldog. They end up, of course, Sid is part of that War Game, the build to the War Games match with the Shockmaster being the fourth member of Sting's team. But before the end of 93, Sid is once again gone from WCW, and he ends up popping back up in WWE in like 1995, 94, 95, where he comes in as the new bodyguard after Diesel turns babyface and starts a feud with Shawn Michaels. Sid is the new bodyguard of Shawn Michaels. It takes it all the way to WrestleMania 11, where Sid is kind of a distraction. Diesel beats Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels shows up on Raw the next night and says he's going to give Sid the night off next time. And Sid destroys Shawn Michaels. Beats him up real bad. Turns Shawn Michaels babyface. Turns Sid heel. We end up getting the Diesel-Sid rivalry. Which is all good, and it ends up going all the way through a bunch of stuff. But I think Sid ends up, Sid's gone by WrestleMania 12. He's gone again, and then he's back in like 96. And this time, when he comes back in 96, he beats Shawn Michaels for the WWE Championship at Survivor Series. And anybody who was there remembers Psycho Sid coming in and beating Shawn Michaels. Madison Square Garden was booing the Heartbreak Kid that night, and boy, were they happy to see Shawn Michaels lose and Psycho Sid become the WWE Champion. He would lose the title in January of 97 win it back in February of 97 to go to WrestleMania and headline, losing to The Undertaker at WrestleMania 13. But really, when you look at that, he headlined 2 WrestleManias, one with Hogan, one with The Undertaker. Pretty good. Sid ends up disappearing for a while, and then in the very late 90s into the early 2000s, he's back in WCW as a top guy, gets a Goldberg streak, the whole 9 yards. But ultimately, I think it's main eventing Mania with Hogan and Undertaker. It's Royal Rumble 92, and it's Survivor Series 96 that really make Sid Sid. So rest in peace to Sid. Just an awesome, awesome wrestler, character. Awesome. Speaking of characters, Jon Moxley returned to AEW Dynamite, and this is a quote that has left a lot of people talking this week. Of course, he said Tony Schiavone called him Buddy, which immediately when Tony Schiavone called him Buddy, I said, Mox better turn on him or do something here, because there's no way Mox is living a life where Tony Schiavone should feel comfortable calling him Buddy. And Mox told Tony Schiavone, this is not your company anymore. It's going to take you a while to figure this out, but this is not your company anymore. And everybody said, what does that mean? Some people said it's the wrong Tony. Tony Khan runs the company, not Tony Schiavone. But then later on in the show, we had Mox and Marina Shafir beating up some enhancement talent or whatever backstage. And you go, okay, so they're clearly starting something. I guess Mox has drifted away from the Blackpool Combat Club, or what's left of it, and is starting this new thing with Marina Shafir. Of course, when he said this isn't your company anymore, it left a lot of people going, Shane O'Mac? Ever since that picture came out, Shane O'Mac? Is Shane O'Mac coming? Is Shane O'Mac coming? I personally don't. I'm not going to say I don't think Shane O'Mac is going to go to AEW, because I wouldn't be surprised if it happened. I don't know what that conversation is. I don't necessarily think this is AEW introducing Shane O'Mac, because if it is, then he's basically bringing Raw Underground to AEW, which would be weird. I feel more like this is Mox and Marina Shafir, and they're going to kind of just be doing their own thing, right? In response to criticisms that AEW has gotten, I feel like maybe they'll bring a blood sports style to AEW, but it's more just going to be, I think Tony Khan has wanted like an invasion angle. He's kind of started it with Paige and the Outcasts for a while. It didn't really pan out, but I think he kind of wants some kind of invasion angle. And maybe there is, and he tried it again. So he tried it with the Outcasts. He tried it again with the Young Bucks and Jack Perry, and it hasn't really, the landing hasn't stuck in terms of any of these invasions. So maybe it's like if Mox and Marina Shafir and whoever else they recruit start this like Fight Club thing, and if you're not with us, you're against us, maybe that's, I don't know what they're looking for, but that's kind of, if I had to guess, where I think it's going. Pretty surprised to see the news that Netflix is releasing the Vince McMahon docuseries that all of us wrestling fans had heard about for years. I know at points, well, I guess I don't know, but I don't know the level of cooperation WWE has with this or not. I know that Vince, they have a ton of interview footage with him, and clearly he was doing it while he was with WWE, so it couldn't be completely separate, but I have no idea. I'm just interested to see it. It's a docuseries. It comes out on Netflix on September 25th. I'm assuming they're going to just drop the whole series then. And with everything that's happened in the last several years, just seeing how they tackle it, and I don't know, just hearing from him, it's a fascinating thing that I'm very interested in seeing how they cover. And then before we get to emails, I feel like this segment of the podcast is reserved for what did JBL do this week? The guardian of professional wrestling. 3 weeks ago shows up at Triple Mania in Nick Nemeth's side. Last week shows up at GCW to help out Matt Cardona and his gang of misfits. Now he shows up in TNA. JBL shows up at the end of the TNA pay-per-view with his black duster on, his big black cowboy trench coat, and whispers something in Dolph Ziggler's ear, Nick Nemath's ear. No, he knows what it is. And then retreats. The guardian of professional wrestling, JBL. I would love, maybe I'll hit him up. I want to interview that guy so bad about what the hell is going on with this run. It is brilliant. It is amazing. It is fun. What is it? It's cool is what it is. It's really, really cool. Let's get to these cool ass emails, huh? NotSamWrestling@gmail.com. NotSamWrestling@gmail.com is the email address. Let's go to it's hard to pronounce your name, sir. Big fan from India. It says, hey, PTC, emailed notsamwrestling@gmail.com. With WrestleMania approaching, WrestleMania is very far away. WrestleMania is not, it's approaching in the sense that anything in the future is approaching. But it is the beginning of September. You got September, October, November, December, January, February, March, and most of April. You got 7.5 months before WrestleMania. We're closer to the previous WrestleMania than we are to this year's WrestleMania. So, I think fan clubs will eventually fight because of clashing over main event contenders, Punk versus Rollins, Cody versus Orton, Reigns versus Rock, and Cena versus Gunther. Can we all agree that all of them are WrestleMania main event caliber matches? For me, Punk versus Rollins night 1, Cody versus Orton night 2. No, what? No. What are you talking about? What is your main event for night 1 and night 2 as of now? Punk versus Rollins is a good call. If you have Reigns versus Rock, that's the main event of night 2, not Cody versus Orton. But Cody versus Rock is going to main event night 2. And then main event of night 1, probably Roman versus either Solo or Jacob. Probably. I would think. Unless you flip that and reverse it, but I would think that night 2 will be that. Let's see. Richard from Berlin, I acknowledge you, my podcast tribal chief. My question is, we all know promos are an integral part of wrestling. So can you rank these superstars based on their promo skills? John Cena, CM Punk, Randy Orton, AJ Styles, Seth Rollins. I don't know, dude. All of them are really good. It depends on what kind of promo they're cutting. No, I'm not going to. That's a silly game. Spencer in Vegas writes in, hey, Sam, why haven't the men's tag titles from Raw and SmackDown been defended on a premium live event since WrestleMania? Is the roster just too stacked for the limited space, or is the tag division just in flux? What can be done to fix it? Thanks as always. Well, I think it's two separate questions. I think the SmackDown Tag Team Championship have been defended a lot. They've just been defended on TV. It just is what it is. It's where it's made sense. And the reason the Raw Tag Team Championship hasn't been defended on Premium Live Event is because they haven't been defended. Nobody, I don't think Finn Balor and JD McDonough have defended the Tag Team Championship once. And I guess if you can figure out how to win a championship and not defend it, more power to you. Floyd writes in, ahoy, Sam. I watched your interview with Drew McIntyre at Fanatics Fest, and you mentioned how some fans are ranking the possession of the Ulafala and even CM Punk's bracelet above the top championships in WWE. I certainly feel that way about the men's and women's tag team divisions. Okay. I think Drew McIntyre versus CM Punk is probably a bigger match than the tag team championship match, if that's what you're saying. Maybe WWE are a victim of their own success, that when we remember the tremendous job the Usos did with the undisputed tag titles, we realize that the men's division is nowhere near as prestigious now. No, it's the Bloodline. The reason the Ulafala is more prestigious than the tag team championship is because that's what the Bloodline's fighting over. Before, the Bloodline was the one defending, the undisputed tag team championship, and it was the Usos. I don't know. I don't think we're putting all this together. On the women's side, there's certainly a pattern of short reigns that do nothing to raise its prestige. What are your thoughts on the tag team scene? What are you talking about? There's not I feel like this whole year they've been doing a really good job with the women's tag team championship. It went from Jade and Bianca over to the Unholy Union, back to Jade and Bianca. That was since WrestleMania. So I don't have any problem with the women's tag team championship. Darren writes in, do you think that Randy Orton punt kick, we will ever see Randy Orton punt kick somebody again? Because that's a great move. I was waiting for it at one point during the match, but it didn't happen. What's your opinion? It's a heel move. I think if Randy Orton were to be a villain, he'd probably do it again, but he's not a villain. He's a hero. So I don't think he would do it. I don't think he would do it right now unless he had a very, 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 very heated rivalry with somebody. Chris writes in, to my podcast Tribal Chief, since it looks like we'll get CM Punk versus Drew McIntyre Part 3, would you rather see it next month at Bad Blood in a stipulation match, loser leaves Raw, number one contender, First Blood, or do you think CM Punk will face Gunther for the World Heavyweight title and then Drew costs in the match leading to a stipulation match, same as before at Survivor Series? Well, we also, I think there's one pay-per-view between Bad Blood and Survivor Series. Yeah, I think I answered this before. I think a buffer might be a little bit better. I mean, a Hell in a Cell match is still a possibility, but like I said on the emergency podcast after Bash in Berlin, I kind of feel like the Hell in a Cell match should go to Liv and Rhea. TJ writes in, this may be a little bit of recency bias, but I feel like this Punk-Drew feud has the potential to be one of Punk's best in his career. I don't think that that's wrong. I'd go Punk Cena at 1, Punk Joe 2, Punk Drew 3. I know people might say Punk Hardy is up there too, but I don't know, man. What do you think? No, I think that history will look back on this Punk-Drew rivalry very fondly, but I think Punk and Seth have the exact same potential to do something. You know, I don't think it's time to rank Punk's feuds because I think this phase in his career is really going to be something. And honestly, I think if you're ranking Punk rivalries, CM Punk and MJF is going to be up there too. That was a great rivalry. It wasn't in WWE, but it was a great rivalry. Jack writes in, hey, Sam, thank you so much for getting my email on the pod last week and reposting my clip on your Instagram story. That's pretty cool. You have family in Detroit. I live about an hour from there. Oh, it's just a thank you. Okay, thank you. All right, you're welcome. Let's see. Hi, my PCTC podcast Tribal Chief. It was so satisfying seeing Rhea and Damian get some revenge on Saturday. Obviously, Rhea still has to get her title back, and Priest has unfinished business with the new head of the Nobody is the Leader Judgment Day, Finn Balor. Finn is clearly calling the shots and conspired with Liv, who was seen coming out of her room shortly after with Liv. He was a hater of Priest since Priest won Money in the Bank. Yeah. No, I mean, I think Liv Morgan and Finn Balor did plan this together, but I don't think the rest of the Judgment Day is in the dark about it. I don't think, anyway. I mean, we'll see. Okay, there's another one about Liv and Finn. I love that. Josh writes in, do you think there's still a chance we see Liv and Finn teaming up? Finn took the hotel key. Not really, because if you're going for the angle that, because it doesn't screw Dominic. Dominic and Finn are on the same team. So it's almost like Finn was probably just talking to Liv and going like, yeah, do your thing. Like, I don't see tension building between Dominic and Finn Balor. Because Finn Balor would beat Dominic Mysterio, right? I just don't understand how that would play out for Dominic. I don't see, like, this scenario, everybody's better for it. The Finn Balor, Dominic, Liv triangle, I don't think any of the three parts of that would be better for it. So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Yeah, and that could change in the future. But as of now, no. Sarah writes in, hope my podcast Tribal Chief is doing well. I acknowledge you. My question is, we know Kevin is slowly turning heel. I think so. I don't know. We don't know that. I think so. Do we think Kevin or Randy turn heel first? Kevin. Yeah, okay. Answer that. I think it's Kevin. Let's see. I'm getting to some new people. Oh, look at this. Dustin, greetings from Germany. I need your opinion on WWE's ticket prices. I don't, whatever, dude. I'm not. Here's what you should sell tickets for. Whatever people will pay for them. That's my opinion on ticket prices. Tyler writes in, Sam, it seems like Solo Sikoa will be Cody's next title challenger. Do you think it would make more sense to have that rematch during SmackDown's USA debut instead of in a PLE again? That's a good question. Let's see. What is that? A week from... Yeah, that's next week. Yeah, I don't think that would be the worst thing in the world. You know, Solo versus Cody on the September 13th SmackDown. And maybe that's when Kevin Owens turns on Cody. I don't think that would be so bad, Tyler. That's not a bad call. Okay, we're going to do one more. This is it. Matt from Missouri writes in, wondering if you noticed how in the strap match, Punk threw Drew through a chair in the corner that Drew had set up. And shortly after, Drew dropped Punk through a table that Punk had set up. Struck me as a clever way of advancing the narrative that these two guys' obsession with destroying the other one puts them on a course to destroy themselves. I like that. You know, you're definitely reading into things a lot, but that's what we do here. We read into things a lot. We speculate wildly. We watch the product. Everything counts. I like that, Matt. I like the way you analyze that. Good for you. Appreciate the emails. Email us, notsamwrestling@gmail.com. If you haven't yet listened to mine and Megan's reaction to Bash in Berlin, go listen to that or watch that. Don't forget to subscribe to all audio platforms as well as video, youtube.com/notsamwrestling. Hit like, subscribe, tell all your friends, and we'll see you soon here on Not Sam Wrestling.